a little bit from, thank you, the recording started, a little bit from our speakers today. We'll be joined by Liz White of the RJ Media Group, Todd Franco with Report for America, and Allison Levine, who is with the Delaware Community Foundation and the Local Journalism Initiative. And I'll read their bios in a second, but just wanted to talk a little bit about one of the really kind of important things about community foundations is that, given the structure and that community foundations are based in the local communities, that they are able to be a lot more engaged and interactive with the communities that they serve beyond just issuing grants. And so as we go into today's conversation, I encourage you to, again, utilize the Q&A to, ask questions and engage with our speakers today. We're going to start with Allison Levine, who is the Vice President for Marketing and Communications at the Delaware Community Foundation, where she also leads work around democracy and local journalism. Allison is the president and founder of the Local Journalism Initiative of Delaware, a nonprofit organization strengthening local news and information ecosystems in Delaware. And then we'll hear from Todd Franco, who works at Report for America as the director of local sustainability and development. He joined the team in 2019 after serving as the editor of The Vindicator from 2007 until it closed in August of 2019. His last few years at The Vindicator were spent significant revenue generating roles at the newspaper. He previously worked in Illinois, Ohio, Indiana, Nebraska, and New York. And then lastly, we'll hear from Liz White, who is the publisher and fifth generation family owner of the 155-year-old Record Journal Media Group in Central Connecticut, which includes the Record Journal's daily newspaper, 7 weekly papers, 2 websites, and a digital agency. She was named publisher in January of 2020. She holds an MBA from Yale School of Management and a bachelor's from Boston College. Was recognized in 2016 by Editor and Publisher magazines as one of the 25 under 35 in the industry, and by Hartford Business Journal as one of the 40 under 40. And Liz is also a member of the Local Media Association's Board of Directors and National Industry Association. So with that, I will turn it over to Allison. Thank you.
Hi, my screen keeps jumping around, so thank you for your patience there for a second. Well, thanks everybody for having me. I'm excited to be here and have an opportunity to talk a little bit about community foundations. As Sean was saying, I have 2 jobs. For my day job, I work at the Delaware Community Foundation. I've been here 11 years. And I lead marketing and communications here, as well as our work around democracy, including local journalism, which is really, as my boss likes to say, that's what gets my socks going up and down, is this convergence of community and democracy and local journalism. And I'm also the president of the Local Journalism Initiative of Delaware, which is a nonprofit that I founded about 18 months ago, coming up on 2 years. And we have a bunch of different things going on. We run an internship program. We run the Delaware Journalism Collaborative. And we also recently completed a statewide assessment of the local news and information ecosystem statewide. And this year, we are aiming to launch a new collaborative nonprofit newsroom focused on the impact of public policy on communities. And we're also working on an arts journalism initiative. So since I have kind of a foot in both worlds here, I'm on the community foundation side, on the funder side, and I'm also on the fund seeker side. As an activist for local journalism, I have some different insights about how we can leverage community foundations, and that's what I wanted to share with you today. I wanted to start by talking a little bit about what a community foundation is and is not. And first, understand that all community foundations are unique. There just isn't really a template for what a community foundation does or what it looks like. In most cases, however, a community foundation is primarily a collection of donor-advised funds. Donor-advised funds, that means that the donor essentially says where the money is going. So that has been kind of a misconception that some folks have. Most of the time, a community foundation doesn't have a ton of discretionary money to give out as grants. And I'm sharing with you here on the screen for the Delaware Community Foundation, we give an average of about $30 million a year out in grants and scholarships total. The money that goes out that we actually get to decide where that money goes, our discretionary grants, is usually right around $600,000 or $700,000, and that covers all of our different grant programs like capital grants and a lot of equity focused grants, et cetera. So the point being that we just don't have a ton of dollars that we get to decide where they go, which is pretty typical of most community foundations. There are some outliers. There are a few foundations around the country that have a lot of discretionary dollars from large endowments that they control. You can look at things, folks in Ohio and Silicon Valley, some in Texas. The natural instinct for journalism funding seekers has been to say, hey, let's tap into those donor advised funds. Why can't we just go hit up the donor advised funds and try to get money from them? But that's what every nonprofit in the world wants, from healthcare people to the people who care about pets. They all want to come in and access our donor advised fund holders. And that's just not our community foundation's role. Part of our role is to help donors achieve their charitable interests. And it's really about when the donors are interested in a subject, we can help them learn more about it. But it's very unlikely. It's part of our job as a community foundation to protect donors' anonymity and privacy. So most of your community foundations are not very likely to put you in front of a bunch of their donors unless they're people who have already said they're interested and want to know more about local journalism. So part of the point here is, you should still give it a try, ask your community foundation to do that, but it's not very likely you're going to win on that. But moving past the unlikely notion that we can just tap into a community foundation's donor advised funds, there are still lots of different ways that community foundations can help support the local news and information ecosystem. And in my experience, the first thing to do is to help them understand why they would want to do that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir, but most community foundations, or many community foundations, don't care a whole lot about journalism for the sake of journalism, but they do care about community and democracy. And so I think it's really important to start by educating your community foundation along with other funders about why we should care about local news and information. And for us, this was simply an education process. We had to show them what happens to our communities and to our democracy, and also looking at issues of equity in our communities. And to do that, we relied on real research and real data about the impact of the loss of local news. And the way it worked in Delaware was our CEO actually helped me to convene a group of local funders who wanted to learn more. And we went through the presentation, we went through the research and the data and shared what we had learned about the impact of the loss of local news. And they really had an aha moment. And once they understood that this is really about democracy and about community, then they're really eager to help address it. And that's where we can start to get our community foundations particularly engaged. So as I was saying before, every community foundation is different, but you can talk with your community foundation folks and figure out what are the ways that you can get them to engage. It's going to be different everywhere. Most community foundations do have some smaller discretionary grant programs. Some are starting community news funds, which Todd is going to talk about in a couple of minutes. Some can help you with loaned resources. When I was getting our local journalism initiative off the ground, we didn't have a website yet. We didn't have social media accounts. the Community Foundation was able to help me get the word out and give me some space on their sites. And in some cases, a fiscal sponsorship might be an opportunity. Your community foundation might be able to set you up with a fiscal sponsorship, which is what they did for me in Delaware, so that you can start your fundraising. But essentially, you're borrowing the community foundation's 501c3 number. So you can do fundraising up front. You can, accept tax deductible contributions even before you have your IRS status. And then you can spin off and create a separate entity, whether that's a community news fund or a nonprofit backbone organization like we've created in Delaware. So there are lots of cool things that community foundations can help you do. I would say that the biggest thing for me in Delaware that the Community Foundation has done is endorsed me and said, look, local journalism does matter. And this is an important issue for our community and our democracy, and we need to be paying attention to this as a community. So yeah, that's, and I forgot to change my slide, of course. So endorsing and validating the importance of local journalism, local news and information, and how it affects our communities, helping to convene and educate the community, including funders and also other stakeholders, other nonprofit organizations. And they can also help connect you to other funders. The Delaware Community Foundation, since we don't have a lot of discretionary funds here, has really only been able to put about $5,000 in actual dollars toward my work through the Local Journalism Initiative. But they've been able to connect me to other funders that has helped me to raise about $500,000 in the first year of our existence. So I just, there's a lot of opportunity and power through community foundations, and looking forward to hearing more from the rest of our panelists.
Thank you so much for sharing. And again, if anyone has questions or that we want to pose to Allison later when we get to the Q&A, you can drop those in the chat, and we'll transition to Todd.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Allison. Just thrilled to be here today, following Allison and Liz's work for years. And just amazing. If you're not following both of them on LinkedIn and on Twitter, please do, because what Allison's done and what Liz has done, just amazing. And hey, Lenfest crew, thank you very much. You guys rock. Got involved with you guys when I first got into this business. Couldn't even spell philanthropy back in 2019 and bumped into Yossi in that city where all great things in America start, Mansfield, Ohio. And Yossi and the Solutions Journalism team coached me great, and thrilled to be in this business still. So I'm RFA. I want to go over a little bit of RFA stuff and then get into the topic today, which is community news funds. So Report for America partners with newsrooms around the country. We place young emerging journalists targeting news deserts, and then my end of the job is to use those positions and that opportunity to introduce local philanthropic support. Half of our newsrooms are nonprofits, some of them veteran nonprofits, NPR, some of them new. And then, of course, half of our partners are for-profits, and they're the legacy news operations, mostly newsrooms, newspapers. And over the 5 years we've been in existence, 548 core members we've placed, 341 newsrooms, 211 cities in America have participated in some form of Report for America. And when you add all that up, in terms of philanthropy, that's we're finishing up our numbers from 2022, and it'll come out to about $23 million in a local philanthropic support from local communities that have participated in their local news programs. So we're thrilled to have that number and that kind of support. In 2022, we were allowed to work with 200 newsrooms in 50 states. So, RFA is just proudly across the America agnostic in terms of what sorts of media we support. We want to target news deserts, and we love being in all sorts of media ecosystems. All those newsrooms have some form of community foundation engagement in their program, which gets to today. And maybe community foundation engagement is not the engagement, may be better said as ambition. A lot of our newsrooms succeed in that, but some of our newsrooms, and it's been talked about today so far, struggle in getting going. And that's kind of where we come in as a catalyst for that. But all of our newsrooms take part in some way in looking at foundations as a way to get started in philanthropic support. Some 2022 anecdotes to share in terms of there's some great things going on, and I love making sure that while people use the word crisis and need and loss, it's kind of the great golden era to start some news operations up as well. And foundations are supporting in so many ways. Thrilled to Dubuque, Iowa, about a year ago, even before the newsroom called us, Dubuque Community Foundation called and said, hey, we've heard about this. What can we do? Green Bay Community Foundation and their friends over in Appleton, we're right next door, doing a great job with Microsoft and 6 local newsrooms, including the Green Bay Gannett site. Thrilled with that. Atlanta Community Foundation just announced this fall participation in the Community News Fund program. That's what I'll get to in a little bit. In Sarasota, the Barancik Foundation created a news fund, $600,000, partnered with their NPR station and other smaller properties. Traverse City, what's going on here? Someone took over my slides. Let me go there. How's that? Am I okay? There we go. This is okay. Traverse City, Community Foundation there led a statewide conversation at their state gathering in November. Cedar Rapids, same thing. New Hampshire's just doing some great things up there. The Granite State News Collaborative. We saw earlier session, Melanie spoke about what's going on there, and the New Hampshire Charitable Trust, just a rock star behind the scenes for the success stories going on there. The coolest thing coming out, actually 2023 anecdote to get started. There's a great announcement coming out of the Midwest in the next couple of weeks that's going to have a community foundation, a private funder, and another foundation launching a 6-figure community news fund. And we're really stoked to get that going as well. So just great things going on all around. Our foundation work, again, we're finalizing our 2022 numbers. We expect them to look kind of like these 2021 numbers, but all foundations participating in local newsroom support, about 159 foundations for about 4 million. If you look underneath there, community foundations at about 33 participating, about 782,000, public foundations and private foundations. So there's a snapshot of our traditional work where foundations participate with our local newsroom partners. Community news funds. That's kind of our newest thing we've got going in terms of trying to do it. Community news funds, we kind of been working on it for 3 years. I got started, like I said, in 2019 and immediately saw what was going on in Colorado with the Gates Family Foundation and the team with Melissa, Spotlight PA and the Lenfest folks. You saw that in a statewide. And then working with Fresno, got really excited with what they were doing with Central Valley. But where it really was the aha moment for us was when Traverse City said we're going to get going on a community news fund as well. And that was about 2021, I think, 2020. And so that was kind of where we said, let's put some work to it. And we just got going, taking a look at a handful of cities and seeing what they're doing. And a report came out. I'll drop it in the link a little bit after I'm done yapping. But the report came out about a year ago. And from the launch of that report, just some great dialogue for the last 12 months. And it just continues as evidenced by this Midwest city and others that are about to announce. So what's a news fund to us? It's a foundation and a local news group community collaboration. It's multiple funders of varied giving levels with multiple year contributions. The community benefits from the news. Encourage more than one newsroom and more than one community-based group to participate, not just one funder and one newsroom. That's happening around the country, and that's okay. We'll take what we can get. But our ultimate ambition is kind of what's going on up in Colorado and what Spotlight has going on. And the smaller cities are starting to get that way as well. Ensure the community receives a broad and inclusive range of news practices. Community Foundation, actually, Allison just said this a few seconds ago. That's why she's a rock star. The community foundations use their social capital. When an editor goes walking into a foundation, it's kind of unfamiliar territory. The dialogue isn't right. The conversation isn't such. When a foundation and funding leaders go to other funders to leverage, hey, this is important. And we know you support all these other things in town, but supporting the local news ecosystem kind of gets above that a little bit. That's kind of what we think a community news fund does well. Community foundations using their social capital. Foundations help with capacity building. We heard from Searchlight, New Mexico about the behind the scenes work that's needed and having that development staff and having the different infrastructure to get fundraising to be a steady stream of revenue. That was cool to hear earlier today. And then the community literacy about the crisis in local news. I've teased for a bunch of years that as odd as it is that we're storytellers, we're one of the worst storytellers in telling our story about the demise of local news and the loss of advertising over the last 20 years. So I think helping with that, making sure the community understands what's all gone on and coaching the newsrooms to get that story out. So we see that with community news funds. So it's been a year in the process, couple years going. Report last year, just 2 weeks ago with my colleague, Amy Bond, we launched community news funds workshops. And if you look at the top, what we're doing, 6 2-hour sessions over the next, 1 a month for the next 6 months, 15 communities participating, and they're rock stars. Allison's on it, Melissa from Colorado's on it, Melanie's on it. So it's weird that it's like old home days when I come visit this session here to see who all is participating in this think tank about community news funds. The goal is to build skill building with the classes. We want to make sure that there's topics on all the things that are working. The goal, skipping to the next slide. Regions, Fresno, Yakima, Atlanta, Lancaster, New Hampshire, Delaware, Lexington. There's newsrooms in it. There's funders. There's people on the waiting list. And it's just a great gathering of rock stars. Once a month, we're going to do it. The hope is by the end, create profiles of each of these communities, benchmark some data of their fundraising, tools for establishing a CNF. We're partnered with Google. Google stepped in and allowed us to create this opportunity, create this window for Amy Bond to work her magic with our team. So Google's hoping that we create a toolkit that we'll share with the entire ecosystem. We'll make sure our Lenfest friends get it, our Night friends, everyone can have it. Marketing material, strategic planning material, summit material. We'd like to build a summit around this and continue following our original 7 communities from the original report. Again, that I'll drop in Slack. Experts in the field. Those are all the things that we hope to gather over the course of the year. So, and then once we get done with this in June and the toolkit gets done about fall, then we hope that partner with Google and folks even on this call today that we can advance the conversation on community news funds and take it around the country to a more detailed, localized opportunity. And with that, Sean, thank you very much, and I'll get out of the way.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Todd. Really appreciate it. And I think we're seeing in these presentations, there's definitely a theme running in terms of how community foundations have the flexibility and really the mandate to really partner and engage with communities. So really excited to have you bring us home, Liz, and then we'll get to some Q&A.
Great. Thank you. And thanks to Lenfest for having me here today. And I'm really happy to be here with Todd, Allison, and Sean. And I'm just so impressed with all the work that all of you do. So as Sean mentioned, my name is Liz White. I'm the publisher, and I'm also the 5th generation family owner of our company. And so we really strive to be cutting edge and innovative. And so adding philanthropic funding for journalism as to our company strategy is an example of that. So I'll explain that today. So these are our, just to give a broader perspective about our strategy, these are our company's 5 strategic pillars of transformation. And you'll see trusted local journalism is the foundation of our company, and then all of our teams in the middle. And then the 5 pillars represent revenue growth areas that will help us support trusted local journalism into the future. And so we've been working on these first 4 pillars for the last about 5 years or so, digital subscriptions, owned and operated revenue, event revenue, and our digital agency. And then 2.5 years ago, we added a 5th pillar, philanthropic funding for journalism. And that's because we feel it's that important in supporting trusted local journalism into the future, but it's one of many ways that we're going to be able to do that. So about 4 years ago, we launched a team to focus on listening and placing our audiences first. And then we participated in the Local Media Association's first cohort of the Lab for Journalism funding in September of 2020. So all of that work led us to launching our Latino Communities Reporting Lab, which is in partnership with our fiscal sponsor, the Meriden Wallingford Community Foundation that you see here. So our mission of our lab is to amplify the voices of our local Latino communities, including providing empowering fact-based news and information, to shine a light on injustices and inequities, and to showcase successes to inspire youth. And since we launched 22 months ago, we've raised a total of 900, and this, I actually updated this slide earlier today. It's close to $1 million now. So, and the split is similar to this, but it's about 70-30 now. And so more than 700,000 has been raised in philanthropic funding. And then we've also leveraged this to get additional support from sponsors and advertisers as well. So looking at more closely at the breakdown of our fundraising, what's not on here is the sponsors and advertisers, and that includes 4 launch partners and 31 advertisers, a lot with grant funded marketing dollars actually, and all of those marketing campaigns are bilingual. And then what you see here up on the screen is that the philanthropic funding comes from 3 Connecticut foundations, 2 national foundations here, the Knight Foundation and the Commonwealth Fund, and then 2 national programs, Report for America, shout out to Todd there, and Stand Together Fellowships, and then the Google News Initiative, as well as some community donation campaigns. So, after 22 months, all this funding has enabled us to hire 5 new bilingual journalists that we didn't have 2 years ago, which has allowed us to significantly expand our newsroom, including a bilingual editor, 2 full-time bilingual reporters, a coordinator, and an intern. And we're also in the process of looking for a development director. So if anybody knows anyone, send them my way. And then we've also been able to produce over 250 stories and videos in both English and Spanish, across print, digital, video, email, social, and text, and attract new audiences and provide complimentary access to the content because of a sponsor. And then we also have ongoing engagement with the community that you see here, including a community advisory board and surveys. And then we have a cross-departmental team that meets weekly to help shape the lab as it grows, and I'm a member of that team. So this is just an example of what you can do with philanthropy, as well as a combination of traditional sponsorship and advertising support. So, the 2 foundations I want to touch on today are the Marion Wallingford Community Foundation and the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven. So here I just want to expand a tiny bit on how our missions are aligned. So first, the Marion Wallingford Community Foundation is very local in our market. It's in our core, towns that we cover, and it's all volunteers. And they are our fiscal sponsor, but they don't have any money to grant. And their mission centers around creating endowments to fund charitable needs to serve Marion and Wallingford. And then next is the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven, which is regional within Connecticut. And they're a large foundation with a paid staff. And we received our first grant from them in 2022. Their mission centers around collaborating to build a more connected, inclusive, equitable community. So the common thing is that they both supported our lab, that it's grounded in community listening and representing underserved communities. So, and then when we look at, what we all have in common, our missions are aligned and we're focusing together to increase civic engagement and community impact. So Maria Campos Harlow is the secretary of the board of our fiscal sponsor of the Marion Wallingford Community Foundation, and she's very special to our lab. We consider her a founding member of the lab. And so 2 years ago, when I approached Maria with this idea of the foundation becoming our fiscal sponsor, she said, wow, this is really different than anything we've done in the past, but I understand what you're trying to accomplish and build. And so how can we get creative to support local journalism? And she's been a tremendous partner and support. And so has everyone else at the foundation on that board. And then Maria spoke at the Google News Initiative Community News Summit this summer. There's a link there if you want to look at it later. There's a video. But her message was about why the foundation supported local journalism and that the world is changing quickly and we can't do things the way we've always done them. So creativity and collaboration is really needed in order to move communities forward. And that our partnership with the lab, or their partnership with the lab, is an example of that. So here is an illustration of a timeline with the Community Foundation of Greater New Haven, which illustrates a direct grant making example. So in the local media association's Lab for Journalism funding that we participated in, our coaches always told us and talked about being very patient and building relationships. And on average, a grant might take 18 to 24 months to get. Which I think can be surprising to a lot of people. But here's, an example of that. So in the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven has been a tremendous partner. And this partnership took about 21 months to build. And what's important about this example is that, we see it as it's our job to help inform the foundations of the community impact that journalism can make and how it can align with their missions and goals as the media industry innovates in this philanthropic funding area. So, this just quickly walking through this, it started with listening conversations in December of 2020 about for-profit versus nonprofit journalism companies, and that they wanted to support innovation, and they recognized this was an innovative direction that the industry was headed. And then we talked to another, senior grant-making person and said, they're interested in our work and continue to be persistent. When they launched a COVID fund grant application, a couple months later, we applied both times, but were denied. But the important thing is that we got our work in front of their team once again. And then in September of 2021, a few months later, a senior director was hosting an in-person grant writing workshop in our market. It happens to be the town I live in, right in our market. So I attended and got to know Jackie, and she's been a wonderful champion within the foundation. In the meantime, throughout the whole process, we continued to keep the foundation updated and the people that we spoke to. So you see those quarterly newsletter updates. Every time we have new hires or receive grants, we're sending that out to our newsletter audience. And then in the winter of 2022, we spoke with some more people, and in April, RFA, Report for America, shared their Community News Fund white paper, and there was a quote from the president of the foundation. So I'll show you that in a second. And then in May 2022, we participated in the foundation had a 2-day online giving event called The Great Give, and there were hundreds of nonprofits participating to raise funds. So we participated in that as well. So this example of the Great Give, it's just another way that you can approach partnering with foundations, even if you haven't received a grant. So for the Great Give, we collaborated with 11 of the nonprofits that were participating, and all of these 11 were from our local market. So we donated a large number of full-page ads to promote raising funds for all of the participating organizations, and our lab was also included in those ads because we were one of the ones raising funds. So this was a wonderful collaboration with both the foundation as well as all of the local nonprofits, and it resulted in over $50,000 in donations raised for these 12 organizations from 514 donors, actually. And then I'm getting there, a couple more slides here. The Report for America white paper that got released on community news funds, the president and CEO of the foundation was quoted about working together and how news connects people. And he said, community foundations need to fund impact and change, and local news helps drive that information and change. So since the foundation was already funding nonprofit journalism in Connecticut, this helped us circle back with our contacts there to highlight that for-profit journalism can drive the information and change the same way that nonprofit journalism does. So this is a wonderful quote to show how supportive the foundation is of collaborating specifically for community impact. And then this is the last piece of the process here. When we circled back through the regular grant application process, we still didn't really fit into the model that they had. So our champion, Jackie, took it to the board and was a tremendous partner, and they approved a $75,000 one-year grant. And then we celebrated. This is not an actual picture of us. I just like that. So just as a quick, takeaways here, what does it mean to be in partnership? It's important to have their missions aligned. It's also important to explain journalism as a public service or public good that results in community impact, and that nonprofit and for-profit journalism is no longer the focus. And then, of course, maintaining editorial independence and donor transparency is very important. So it's clear that no funder has control over editorial decisions. And then last but not least, we also learned that often foundations appreciate that we have a community advisory board made up of local people, representative of the community, to provide feedback and guidance so we can continue our listening. So there you go, Sean, I'm handing it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank all of you for your contributions and sharing all of this great work. And so I have one quick question that I'll ask of each of you, and then I'll get to some of the Q&A. And that is, and Liz, I think you began to touch on it in your wrap up, but what are some kind of characteristics of engaging with a community foundation that are unique to working with that type of a foundation versus a national foundation in terms of flexibility, partnership? What are some of the things that stand out that make community foundations particularly critical partners for this type of work? And well, we can start. I'll start with Todd. No, round robin.
Yeah, I just think that the community foundations just have the core understanding of what works in your community, and also going to be the great representative of what your community wants. So I think they are a good voice to the newsroom, a conscience, and a baseline for what we hear from citizens and from leaders. But I think they then turn and go around to that same community and say, this is important. There's 70 other needs in the city of Youngstown, which is where I'm from. There's 70 other needs right now, but this thing about local news, it touches all 70 other things. So pause about this one as you're writing your checks for $1,000 or $100,000.
Allison?
Yeah, completely agree with Todd as usual, because Todd's a rock star. It's, community foundations know the local community. We know the people, we know the people here, we know the culture and the evolving and emerging needs. That's our job. That's our real value add as a foundation, as a community foundation. And I think that the real power of community foundations is not usually in the dollars they can give you directly. It's more in the convening and the connecting. The civic leadership role of a community foundation is connecting you to the needs and the organizations in a community, and also to other funders in a community. And really, in order for a local news outlet to succeed, you got to have local buy-in. It's, we can't, as much as I would love to, we can't rely 100% on national funders. And that's where a community foundation can help you build those relationships to secure a broad local base.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Liz, anything that you'd like to expound on?
Yeah, I echo what Todd and Allison said. And, our community foundations either know us personally or know our work, or our geographic area. So they understand the issues that are specific to our local area and how we're related to them and how we can, help inform people about those topics. I think the other, just as a comparison to because you mentioned the national foundations too, Sean, is what in our experience, because we are a very small local community newspaper company or media company, the difference is the national foundations often want a broader reach, or they want a way to replicate the model across the country. Right. And so that I'm just making the distinction between those, and that's how we've been able to kind of get, partner with smaller or community foundations as well as national.
Absolutely.
Can I add one more thing to that, Sean? Is, I think community foundations also can add a lot of credibility when you are trying to present a perception of neutrality and nonpartisanship and independence that's so important in what so many of us are trying to do. A lot of organizations at the national or local level tend to have some kind of an agenda. A community foundations, our only interest area are the community that we serve, and it needs to be the whole community. Community foundations tend to pride themselves on being a big tent that we're trying to serve all people in our community, including diversity of political thinking, as well as diversity in the racial, ethnic, geographic sense. So that's, I think that's something that community foundations can really lend to a lot of our local news initiatives, is that air of independence.
Can I just add one thing too? Because something Allison said made me think of this, and I agree with you, Allison. I think it's also a stamp of approval when you have your local community foundations supporting you. And we found that with the our fiscal sponsor, because they're in our market, but then also with the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven. A lot of people, I can't tell you how many people we talked to leading up to it, like thinking about different ways we can find funding and have partners. If people said, well, Community Foundation for Greater New Haven, that's the one that you should have funding from. And if it's like you didn't have it, it was sort of like, why not yet? Right. So there's like a stamp of approval on that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I want to get to one of our questions here that was voted up. from Mark Glazer, and it reads, it says, many community foundations have specialized funds. How do we convince them to set up specialized fund for local news? They understand emergencies such as wildfires and COVID, but our emergency is more slow moving here in New Mexico. So talk a little bit about, that relationship building and moving an agenda within the community foundation that anyone
I can share on that if y'all don't mind. My boss is Stuart Comstock-Gay here in Delaware, and we are actually working on building a national cohort of community foundations that are specifically focused on issues of democracy, including journalism as one of the major pillars. It's a tough lift. I was sort of joking with someone in the chat that it really took me 2 or 3 years of just nagging people at the community foundation. And that, I think, is why we're seeing some community foundations, if you have an internal nag who's passionate about local journalism, we have we have Courtney Bankston in Wichita, we have Doug Root in Pittsburgh, we have a couple of these folks around the country. It helps to have an internal advocate who can get the ear of the CEO and the program team. But it really, for me, has been about connecting people. They don't care about journalism as a vehicle, right? We are the journalism nerds, but they do care about community and democracy and equity. And when we can connect to those issues, that's when funders start to get on board. But identifying at your local community foundation, if you can identify an internal advocate, which is very often the MarCom person, the marketing communications person, because a lot of us are former journalists, that will help start to build some traction internally.
And can I touch on that
Absolutely.
too, from the standpoint of none of our funding has come from a fund that supports journalism, like through a foundation. It's because we found creative ways to meet the needs of what their goals were and what our community's goals were, and to create community impact. So they're like a COVID-19 vaccine reporting project or health equity reporter. Like we saw needs and opportunities to expand our reporting by what the foundations had as a priority and what our community had as a priority as well.
I would just throw in, we just have to stay the course. We're all heading down to Miami in a few weeks, or many of us. How long has Knight been trying to make this happen and make it happen? And Jennifer and Alberto, and then Lenfest comes along, and Mr. Jerry's story to hear at the start of the session. How long have we been working at this? And just watching our data, it's happening, and the phone calls and this announcement coming out in a few weeks. We just have to stay the course, tell the story. It is happening. And also too, I think, make sure, I get the crisis. I want to keep hammering that. I get the crisis. There's a solution, and there is a way to do it. And we've been showing it, and we can keep showing it, and the foundations will come along. They'll have to.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all. So next I want to go to a question from Andrea Houston, who's as a publisher in a digital outlet in Canada. And she's trying to find new revenue sources to produce our investigative journalism. She struggles with conflict of interest and ensuring that they don't sacrifice their values. How do you balance that? How do you balance accepting funds from foundations associated with companies that are not ethical, or tech companies that help create the crisis?
It sounds like Liz.
So I think what's important, and this was something that we talked a lot about in the LMA Lab for Journalism funding, is that you have the editorial independence and donor transparency guidelines up front. It's part of the sort of the rules and guidelines that you set up front. And then if anyone has any issues with that, then maybe they're not the right partner for you, right? And you kind of make that line clear. And a lot of times what this gets compared to is, for the whole history of newspapers and media companies, we've had the question come up with conflict of interest with advertisers, and we always draw a very clear line there as well. So it's very similar to that. You just have to stand your ground and not partner unless you feel like it's the right fit.
Yeah,
I agree. I think it's a matter of creating a clear editorial policy and a clear editorial wall. And just like with advertisers, don't be too dependent on any single foundation or funder or advertiser or revenue stream of any sort. You just diversify.
Yeah, absolutely. Todd, any thoughts on that one? No.
Spot on.
Yeah, and I would definitely say, and I mean, it goes back to doing your homework, right? And as you're building those relationships with your community foundations and understanding, but then also being willing to push, right, in establishing those relationships in terms of who they're invested in and who's on their, where their endowment is invested in, and can you be socially conscious? And at the end of the day, to Allison's point, you have to stick to your guns and, make a decision about where you want to go. So another question that came in from an anonymous attendee is what sort of events are you participating in, and how do you involve partners? How do you look to engage with potential community foundation partners, and what types of events do you do together?
Yeah, the folks that we encounter are just using a whole gamut of one-on-ones for sure. But then as you start to grow it out, I mean, I think Rob up in Spokane is doing some great things out there. That's on the RFA website. Just engagement activities, coffee sessions. El Paso had a friends circle, a friends giving kind of situation where 17 funders pulled in about 60 other people to pay for the core member. So I'd offer those as ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, we haven't done a lot with funder events yet, but what we have done is attend a lot of events to expand our community listening. And that has helped us with more outreach to potential partners, potential people who might be funders in the future, things like the Marin Puerto Rican Festival, and reaching out through our Latino grocery stores and different partners where we can do more community listening. And the more we do that, the more people know about the lab and the potential for partnering with us.
I can't say that we've done events yet for this. I mean, one of the things that we are looking at, though, is community events around public policy issues that journalism can help inform and facilitate, and then looking at getting sponsors, like corporate sponsors for those types of events. I'm not sure if that's quite what the question was, but sort of as another opportunity for philanthropic funding, particularly from some of the potential corporate donors who can sometimes get, corporations have money in different pots. So they might not have philanthropic dollars. They might not be able to give you CRA dollars, but they might be able to give you money from their marketing budget if they can call it a sponsorship. So that's another sort of creative way, I think, that we're looking at.
Yeah, and so thank you for that. I have a question from someone who's in a Danny Stouser and he's talking about, we talked about community foundations starting funds that are specific and, funding startups. But his question is how do you encourage foundations to invest in what's already there? So he's in a small community, about 300,000 population, and he's not really interested in creating a fund that would dilute support for existing, groups. But so how do we encourage, or have you had experience in creating or partnering with community foundations to just invest more or invest more consistently in shoring up existing outlets in your communities versus creating new startups?
That's partly what we're trying to do in Delaware. That's why we created the local journalism initiative, to kind of have a centralized, we're trying to create kind of a backbone organization that will elevate the whole ecosystem. I think, what Melissa is doing in Colorado is a great example of trying to kind of prevent some of that dilution issue, because I think there is a risk in any community that you're going to have multiple nonprofit outlets or multiple startups trying to compete for funding, and that's not going to help any of us. So looking at it as, I'm trying to look at it as an ecosystem issue rather than helping individual outlets. I don't know, Liz might disagree with me on this one, but it's, trying to think of it as a holistic issue for the whole community is the approach we're trying to take.
Yeah. Liz, any thoughts? Oops.
Unmute.
The chat thing keeps going over my mute button. I'm sorry.
No problem.
No, I agree with Allison. I think, I mean, of course, we want to, raise funding for our existing organization, but I do think thinking about the ecosystem is important. And also, I think what we haven't talked much about is collaborations between media companies as well, right? And I think we've done some of that. A lot of organizations that are philanthropically funded have done that because I think it works for both the community, or all three, the community, the funders, and for the media companies, right? So I think we're stronger together.
Yeah, if I could just jump in, Danny, there's certainly news groups and foundations out there doing it as you suggest, just one newsroom and one funder, and it works, and it's fine. I think 3-5 years down the road, I think we got to bring folks together. We need the collaboration. Gone are the days when 6 of us can go cover the mayor's press conference and no souls at the county commissioners. We need collaboration on news. We make sure that all the voices of the community are represented. For my 30 years in the newsroom, we weren't great at making sure that every corner was covered. So if the nonprofit starts up and they want to cover ice hockey, I think the hockey community probably love that. So I think, there's issues like that to consider, but ultimately I think it's the efficiency that needs to happen, and funders are just not gonna, and how much funding are you gonna benefit from if others are in the pot? Maybe there's a funder who's excited about ice hockey, and now they're gonna jump into the fund because they weren't excited about your group, but they see hockey and that money gets spliced around. So I think down the road, more funders and more efficiency comes when that fund involves a lot of entities, both newsrooms and funders.
I can share from the funder side that we are not interested in funding competing entities. And if, I sort of was lucky and got in on the ground floor of this, but if we have multiple entities coming to our major funders asking, for multiple journalism projects, they won't deal with that. They will say, if other journalism entities go to our big funders in Delaware, they won't fund them directly. They say, go talk to Allison because you need to be part of the collaborative before we'll even deal with you. So we're finding that more and more the funders on all issues, and in journalism too, they're looking for collaboration. They aren't interested in funding, 10 startups in the Delaware media market. They want to see us working together and addressing the big picture issues.
Absolutely. And both from a local funder and the perspective of working in media is that it has definitely been, my experience and our efforts really to look at how do we spur collaboration, and understanding that not forced collaboration, but where it is truly complementary, and where it is, that notion of, how do we really engage the complete ecosystem to make sure that we're providing and meeting the needs and filling gaps where they exist. We've got about 5 minutes left in our session today. Are there any parting thoughts or things that you might want to leave our audience with?
Just thanks for fighting the good fight, I guess.
Just stay with it. It's changing. I mean, to go from, an average raise of 14,000 per core member to 32,000 last year across our entire ecosystem, people are participating in these calls, keep coming. So just, back to Mark's question out in New Mexico, it's just a thrilling time. I think, Airbnb didn't start out as a global domination when everyone was happy with their Holiday Inns. They started, small communities at a time, and they've grown. And no one would have believed it in 2010. People didn't believe about funding journalism, and I think we just stay with it.
Yeah, similarly, but just as our own example, 3 years ago, if you asked me that we would be doing this, I would have said, no way. So, I mean, it's just that's how fast things have changed. I mean, 3 years doesn't sound, I guess maybe that sounds like a long time, but it really isn't. And also if you said we had raised, we would raise $1 million, I would have also said that's impossible. So I think there's a lot of listening and being creative with how to partner with different funders and all kinds of opportunities. And what I showed today too, just as our example, Like, we haven't even touched on small donors, major gifts, like there's a lot of other things we haven't even explored yet. So I just want to make the point that I think there's all kinds of opportunities for fundraising for any organization, and you kind of have to figure out what's the best fit for you and your market and your model.
Great. Thank you. And I'm going to turn it over to Allie.
Thanks. Well, that's our time for today, but this has been a really amazing session, and Sean, Liz, Allison, Todd, thank you. It's clear from the notes in the chat as well that folks have found this extremely helpful and respect your work so much. So thank you so much. We will share out not only the recording of this session, but any resources that were shared. And we encourage you to connect with each other. There's email addresses shared in the chat, and you can direct message folks through the Zoom events platform. So please continue these conversations. And lastly, if you want to join us, meet your colleagues, we're doing a round robin networking session in about half an hour at 5:30 Eastern. So we hope we'll either see you there or see you tomorrow for the rest of our summit programming. Thanks, everyone.
All right.